Hey everyone, welcome back to the Becoming Anchored podcast. We're so glad you're here with us today. I am Lauren Jackson, one of the hosts. This is Laura Deneen, our other wonderful host. We're super excited about this episode today. We've got a really wonderful guest with incredible wisdom, and we're really excited to jump into the topic that we have. Before we do that, just a quick intro about Anchored Counseling Company. So we're a small group practice in the Brentwood, Tennessee area. We work with clients from grief, anxiety, depression to eating disorders, kind of everything in between through the lifespan. We love what we do, and we have adored this platform and getting to connect with you guys in a new way. Quick disclaimer before we do jump in, this podcast in this episode is not meant to be your therapy. This is for informational and entertainment purposes only. So if you're listening and you feel like you could benefit from therapy, reach out to us. We'd love to connect. We'd love to help you get connected to support. So yeah, without further ado, we have Lauren Martin on the show. I know Laura's going to help introduce her, and we're just super excited. Yay. Well, yeah, welcome, Lauren. It is just a joy to have you. I know we wanted to have you on the show, and you were one of the first people that we thought of, and schedules aligning for the three of us. We all have little ones at home, and so thank you for your time today. It's really just such a gift to us and our listeners. We're so grateful. If you're new to the show, really the purpose of this podcast is twofold. First and foremost, we are here to be human with y'all. We talk a lot about some of our own struggles and pain and some of the hardships and lessons that we have learned over the years. And then we also have the amazing gift of sitting with clients on a daily basis. And we've got two Laurens on the show. So co-host Lauren and I know love the world of therapy, and I know Lauren Martin does as well. And we just have such amazing privilege of hearing people's stories and sitting with them in their pain and celebrating their joy. And so that's really what we're about on this show. And so without further ado, thank you for being here. And Lauren, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I haven't seen you. I'm like misty because it's long.
I know we live like right down the street from each other, but it's wild how just crazy. But yeah, Lauren is an amazing expert on so many different topics and has so many fun resources and things to share that she will be sharing at the end of the show. We were trying to nail down a topic before we started recording today, and we decided on the loneliness behind perfectionism. And Lauren is such a wealth of knowledge on really all of the nuances that can go into perfectionism, and really has just wonderful ideas around starting to work towards recovery from perfectionism and really challenging some of the perfectionism that might be there for you. So I'm super excited just to dive in today. Thank you, Lauren, for being here.
What are we going to talk about?
Yeah, so the title, first and foremost, right? Like that title of the loneliness behind perfectionism just like really resonated with me as you said it. I'm like, boom, let's talk about that. Because I think it's so true, and the title speaks for itself, right? So tell us a little bit more about how you conceptualize both loneliness and perfectionism, and kind of how those two coexist as a therapist and even as a person.
Therapy, like therapists are humans, so we're the mishmash of both. But so perfectionism, I think when we all think about perfectionism, there's like the Stepford wife or like the Martha Stewart-esque type of really put together and all of that fun stuff. And I don't see perfectionism that way. I see perfectionism in the sense of having a vision of how things should be, and does it line up to that? But when we cling to that vision to where we don't see any other option. And so that can look different for different people. I just read the book, The Perfectionist's Guide to Losing Control. And she talks about, I think her name's Catherine Schaffler, I don't know. But it's a very good book. And she talks about the 5 different types of perfectionists. And it really does encompass how perfectionism can look so different. Because like for me, I am a very open and authentic person, but there are certain parameters to my authenticity. And sometimes that is to protect, like in a clinical sense, like my clients know me, but they're not going to know everything. But where it sometimes gets tougher is if I'm masking like around friends, or if I'm having a tough day and I think that's the part of perfectionism that we don't really talk about, because burnout and perfectionism, they're both exhausting. And if we tend to be perfectionistic, the worse that we're feeling, the more we isolate. And so then we just put our head down, we work, we assume that we're the problem and that we need to get ourselves right before we are worthy of love or connection again. And it just becomes this vicious cycle because we don't share any other opinions about ourselves.
Yeah. I relate to this on a deep core level. Maybe you're watching this, I'm like using my hands. I say that I'm like a recovering ING perfectionist because I think it is an intentional, active choice to choose perfection and to choose to be vulnerable and to choose to be authentic. But yeah, that makes sense. Just all of these moving pieces that you're talking about, like the tendency to withdraw, isolate, avoid if we have a perceived imperfection, and then the loneliness that results from that can just feel so visceral and so real. I think for those of us that are perfectionists, by nature and are working on that. So yeah, I just relate to everything that you shared on a deep level.
Go ahead, Lauren.
No, I was just going to say, when you were speaking to the isolation piece, that's where that loneliness is going to come in, right? And I resonate with the perfectionistic piece as well. I think probably a lot of people can to some degree, right? And I feel like perfectionism, just like there are maybe different types of perfectionism or how it shows up for people, I feel like it can also be like an internal sense of like, I have to be perfect, or I have to do things perfectly, or I have to show up in this perfect way, as well as this external sense of the things around me need to be perfect. My environment, and I resonate with that just from like my peacekeeper and how my environment can sometimes get the best of me and me wanting that to be just right. And that external piece also feels like it can be pretty debilitating as well.
Put together the beautiful party, celebrating. Let's just say you put together a party for your birthday. So you're not you're actually celebrating you, and you take this risk, because it is a risk, right? To put your vision out there and to have your friends come in and to have the food and to be on and talking, and you want everybody to have a good time. But what happens sometimes if you're a perfectionist is that you have the party that's for you, but you spend the entire party catering the environment and making sure that everybody is experiencing it in that way that you want it to, so that by the time the party shuts down and everybody goes, you didn't connect with anybody. You didn't feel seen. Like, people saw you, but were you seen? Or were you hiding behind, I hope none of y'all run into me at a party now, because you'll see if I'm like on one, I'll start bussing the tables for people. I don't like clean things up. And I think it's that whole thing of, there's a difference between being alone and lonely, because you can be around people all the time and still feel really lonely. And I think that's the biggest struggle for perfectionists, is that people like them. People rely on them. People actually, like, the affirmation is like one of the bigger reinforcers of that perfectionism. Mm-hmm. And so that's like, we're performing and the mask comes on and it just becomes a vicious cycle. And then like and I think that's why the idea of calling yourself a recovering perfectionist, I resonate with that, in the sense of, if you're a perfectionist, you're going to be one for a lifetime, and that's okay. Where can we move it to a manageable place? Because if we completely drop perfectionism from us, then we don't have any starting ground, because it's like, who am I? Who am I if I'm not hosting the party? Who am I if I don't get straight A's? And so I think that's where it all intertwines, because the external is reflecting the internal. That's where that.
And I think that's such a great point that you make, Lauren, because I think this speaks to the fact that somebody's tendency towards perfectionism, or that part of them that is perfectionistic, is not bad or wrong, right? It's what is motivating it. Why has it got so loud and so intrusive? Mm-hmm. And how can we how can maybe the work is like, how do we turn the volume down on that to make it more adaptable and more helpful? Because when we're hosting the party and we find that we haven't connected with anybody at the end and we're feeling lonely, that can be a sign that maybe this isn't adaptive anymore.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like not working anymore. So it's okay. I know I love practical solutions. So for our listeners who are listening, if this story that Lauren has told resonates with you, it's okay, then what do I do? And I know that y'all can relate to that, right? As therapists, when clients are like, okay, Laura, what do I do now that you've illustrated this example? And a couple of things are coming to mind for me, just as you've shared this story, because I do love to host. And I think one of the best things that I can do in environments like that is ask for help. Recognize that it doesn't all have to be on me for everything to go perfectly.
Right.
Yeah, asking for help, and then also permission for things to go imperfectly. Like maybe we run out of like a soda or food, and letting that be okay versus that performance that you were talking about, Lauren. Or just two ideas in that example that you shared specifically that came to mind for me of things that I've certainly tried to do over the years, hosting and having people over.
I love that you said that. Oh, sorry. I wanted to say, I love that you said that because we perfectionists are so good at not making mistakes that we've lost tolerance for them. And however, and I want to bring this because like when we talk about like exposure stuff, and you didn't say this, but people, how we've assigned people in the past, we'll just go make some mistakes and see how that happens. That's not really going to work, because then you're going to get really good at making fake mistakes. So it's the idea of how can you stop getting ahead of everything all the time if you lean in. If you're more of like the avoider, like how can you stop researching and just get messy that way? So if you're overly preventative, just go with the information that you have. If you're overly avoidant, why don't you try to learn by experiencing instead of just intellectualizing? So I wanted to offer that framework too.
That's good.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, making the fake mistakes. I chuckled when you said that.
Because we all assigned it. We've all assigned it to people. And we understand the concept, but if they're a perfectionist, they're going to come in and they're going to be like, I made the most epic mistake last week, but they did it to where it didn't really impact anything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. Well, one thing that came to mind as you were sharing this idea of masking. So for our listeners, some of you may have heard this term, some of you may not have. But Lauren, I'd love for you to elaborate on that and what that means to you as a person and clinician, and how you see that show up in your clients and what we can do about it. So
that term masking has really come up with neurodivergence, in the sense of, I think that's like where the term first really started coming into play, especially like with autism, because they're trying to figure out social cues. But I think masking is pretty universal, just at different levels. And so the easiest way that I define masking is that your outside's not matching your inside. So there's a lack of congruency, but it also goes into context too. Like I said earlier, I am not going to tell my clients that I'm not going to tell them that. That's not what I need to do. And so we don't want to unmask to that level. We want to take context into consideration. But for me personally, I can feel in my body when I know that I'm performing, and not in a context of where the performing doesn't really need to happen. And so it's like in RO, we talk about there's two subtypes of it. So if you're overly agreeable, somebody could have ran into you, they rear-ended you, so it's clear that they're at fault, and you would apologize. You're like, I'm so sorry that happened. I'm so sorry you ran into me. Instead of being like, no, you apologize. How people bump into you and you go, oh my gosh, sorry. They ran into you, you know? And so most of our overly agreeable people will be a little bit more submissive, because it elicits that caretaking response, and that's how we get away from feeling that weird imperfectionism. And then with overly disagreeable, they're like the people that are too cool for school. I got Taylor Swift tickets. It's not a big deal. Why would I make a big deal of that? And so what happens is that it creates this sort of barrier, because we're pushing them back. And so that feels protective in that sense too, because people don't mess with us or they don't mess with our plans. So then we don't have to go into the messiness of imperfectionism either.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's all interconnected, right? Like this over agreeable, or what was the second? You said the disagreeable state.
Yeah. So overly agreeable, overly disagreeable. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all interconnected to the perfectionism of, I don't want you to see my flaws, because then you see my flaws and then I feel shame. And where does that lead us? Because I don't want to feel those things. Yeah.
And we don't, for a lot of us, we get scared that if we mess it up, if we mess up relationship especially, or if we don't correct, that will lead, because shame essentially is being disconnected from your, like the word tribe in the sense of like evolutionarily. Like back in the day, if I messed up and the fire went out in the middle of the night, then like I would literally die. Like that's how we are wired. Except now it's, I wore the wrong shoes to this event. Everybody's wearing sneakers, I'm wearing heels. And so I'm different than everybody, because you literally are. But you're not going to, you die at that. I do not know where you were at. With that, I'm just saying it. You didn't never wrong. Yeah. But I think that people, so like being connected is such an essential part to staying alive, that there's more weight. I think we feel it inside, but we don't recognize it externally, because we say things like, well, don't care what others think about you and all that. But I care a lot. Like, I may not come across like it, but I give many craps.
Totally. I do too. Yeah. And just in full transparency. Yeah. Like I want to be liked. A lot of my work in therapy has been sitting with the discomfort of possibly not being liked, and with different roles I've had in my life, like wife, friend, mother, boss. It's okay, if somebody doesn't like me, that feels uncomfortable to me. And there's lots of different reasons for this, right? Whether it was temperament, the way I was raised plays into this, to that environmental like piece as well. But yeah, it doesn't feel good. And we have to do a lot of work around it.
We do. And sorry. I just get so excited. I get so excited. I'm like, I want to respond to everything.
No, I love it. I love it. So the mask helps us to stay perfect. So how do we, because I love what you said earlier, and I want to remember how you said it, that you're talking about that we mask when we're not congruent, right? When our insides aren't matching our outsides, and we can start having awareness of that when we maybe bring insight into, I'm performing and the performance isn't necessary. I think that's how you said it. And how do we like start taking that off and not doing that performing?
The first thing is going to be clocking it. Fred, there's got to be a degree of ownership of like, all right, perfectionism is a thing I struggle with. And you know what? I tend to be overly agreeable. I don't like that I do that. And I'm saying it because I am more overly agreeable. Like, I'm so chill. And like inside, like I'm like that fire person on inside out. It's just like raging. It happens. Right. There can be shame around that. Like I've worked with people that are more disagreeable and they're like, I feel like I'm just a horrible person. Like I feel like a horrible person. Well, yeah, you might be more blunt. You might call things as it is, but there's a difference between being blunt and connected and being blunt to push people away. So the first thing you have to do is clock it. And then from there, if you're disagreeable, your job is not to become overly agreeable like that, because that's just I think we do that too much. We want to be perfect at changing. So if you're disagreeable, you start agreeing to things and then the resentment builds. And then my overly agreeable people will start like setting so many boundaries. And no, what you want to do is ask yourself, if you're doing it, you have to get curious on the back end. So you have to have an understanding as to what things are maybe prompting that, and also what you're wanting out of those relationships. So you have to start defining things. And then from there, you can think about your options for how you, in an RO, we call it socially signal, like how you're more expressive to others. And that is going to take trial and error. I know in RO, we like practice conversations. We do role play of like, How are you going to tell your boss that you're taking vacation? How are you going to tell this person that what they said hurt your feelings and you're sorry that you snapped back, but you really do care about them? It does take like a degree of rehearsal in that sense when it comes to the social signaling piece. Well, what's going to help your nervous system with that is exposing yourself to novelty, getting out of routine, trying some things that are new. I felt like in RO class, I told people to wear the watch on their opposite wrist. And because it's physically uncomfortable. And so the idea is like warming your nervous system up with some of these like small changes. And then you'll be able to sit in that discomfort when you're confronting somebody or being more vulnerable with someone.
I love that. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what allows us to make the change, right? Because I know that as therapists, I know that the three of us have been doing it for a while now. And we know that asking someone to make a change for the sake of making a change isn't super effective. Like they have to understand what their why is. And so full circle, it's okay, why are we even challenging the mask that pops up with perfectionism? It's so that we can live in connection with other people. And I think even in my own therapy journey, things that I've done that have been really hard, understanding why I'm doing the thing is really fruitful. And if I don't feel like doing it, it's a good reminder too of, okay, there's a reason that we set this goal. There's a reason that we're doing this, because we all need community. We need connection. We need belonging, acceptance, all the things that are so life-giving for us as humans.
A shift in environment can do wonders. A question that I bring up a lot is, are you putting effort into people that you actually don't like? Are you putting effort into things that really aren't aligned? And we all have our reasons. It's like when people stick with a certain major because they feel like that's what they should be doing, or they stick around in a specific church when they know there's one that's more aligned with them. I think we sometimes go into all or nothing, or like the idea like that we can't U-turn. You can pivot, you can shift, you can change. It just may not have to be as drastic as you think. And you're right, you can't make a change just for change's sake. There's got to be a carrot at the end of that, or else you just keep doing what you're doing. If your perfectionism is not messing your life up and you feel connected, then do you. Please don't waste your energy on that.
Yeah. Or maybe sometimes people don't realize maybe it is messing their life up, or they don't realize that the root of that is perfectionism or unrealistic expectations of self, capital S, or other people. And so then they come to therapy like, oh my gosh, I have all these problems in my life and help me. And then after some sessions, we're like, ding, you may be a perfectionist. And then once we know what it is, then we can like work on it. So yeah.
Control is a really powerful thing. And some of us feel like we don't have any control over our lives. Some of us know we have a lot of control because we curated our life that way. And it's really exhausting. If you're the only person driving the car on a road trip, you're going to get tired.
Yeah, that's a beautiful picture of what perfectionism is. Yeah. Lauren, thank you for your time. You're just, you're such an amazing person and friend and colleague. And I love how you talk about this topic. I feel like I have gleaned new ways of saying things from you. I like learning from other therapists, and thank you for your time today. This has been so much fun just to chat with you and get to spend time with you. And I mean, I will take some of the things that you said for my own life too. So as I know that we briefed you before we started recording, but we close with an affirmation and with homework. You are welcome to provide one or both of those. And then as we close too, we'll share with our listeners how they can find you and all of the goodies that you have to offer. So would you like to close with affirmation or homework?
Oh my gosh, yeah, because this is like a jam. So like with the affirmations, I always like the idea, you can always quit. Like
I love it. That.
I give myself permission to quit. Because mama didn't raise no quitter, but she's going to learn to be a quitter. And then,
yeah.
Homework. Oh my gosh. I would assign people to sit down and just ask themselves, what do they want? And just say, please up. No direction, just open-ended. What do I actually want? Because for some people, like even I just felt it in my chest. It's a very uncomfortable thing. And a lot of times we don't know because we rely on the guidance. Like even at the start of the podcast, they're like, what do you want to talk about? And my immediate thought was, what do you want to talk about? Tell me what to say. I am the best podcast host or podcast guest ever. And so that idea of really bringing that question into play of what do I really want, and recognizing that some of that stuff, if it's at the top, everything can't be at the top. But that's for future editing. But like if you are a person that tends to, their mind goes blank, sit with that question because it might just be on her phone.
Yeah. 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 When I have thoughts even about the homework, because I'm like, ooh, is this what you want or what your perfectionism wants? But I know you left it open and
But that's the thing with perfectionists is that we tend to edit before we express. And so the idea is to have that like unedited space because you can always go back. You can cross things out. You can always quit. You can quit that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love both the homework and the affirmation. Thank you so much for being here today. Okay, so tell us all the things about you, both as a therapist. I know you've got some amazing new business ventures, so we'd love to hear.
So I see my current clients in practice. I'm novel counseling in Franklin. I'm not taking anybody new right now because I'm spending a lot of my energy with the 9 to Kind planner. So the 9 to Kind planner, it's a digital and paper planner, and it's meant to be for perfectionists and people pleasers or overthinkers or overdoers, as I say it. But it's basically just, it is like a planner and a journal all in one. And it's undated because it needs to go with your life. And I've really just been like sitting on the concept of like a lived in life. I think because I've been using my planner for almost a year now. And it's got dirt all over it. It's got scribbles but that's a planner that has lived some life. So that's like what it's about. It has therapy worksheets. It has self-care indexes so that you have inspiration, weekly affirmations, weekly reminders to do self-care. And it's a beautiful layout. I love it when people say that the planner is beautiful because my inner perfectionist is, yes, it is absolutely gorgeous. But that's my little baby. So 9tokind.com if you want to get one. And there's also a really great daily planning notepad too. And that's become a favorite also for me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been so good chatting with you. And thank you guys for being here on the Becoming Anchored podcast. We'll see you next time. Take care.